Welcome back. This is the Survive and Thrive series, and I'm Nathan Hurd, Chief Growth Officer of the Oxford Club. Together, we're here to answer one question. How do we look back on this whole experience and view it as one of the most valuable of our lifetimes? You know, when this is all over, I hope that you are fully invested. And I don't just mean, financially invested in the stock market or otherwise. Certainly that. But I mean invested in every area of your life that brings you fulfillment and happiness. Isn't that what this whole thing's about? This experience has brought us back into our common humanity. It's made us realize how fragile we are and how much we need one another. People are doing anything they can to connect. And we're very lucky to have this technology. 20 years ago, this would have been a completely different experience. But today, at least we can see each other even when we can't be together. Relationships really are the greatest teachers. And think about this, looking back on your life at the end, what do you imagine you will value the most? I bet it's the people. I bet it's the connections and the relationships you forged over your lifetime. Many of you have written me about today's topic, and I believe it's the greatest investment you can make of your life. We learn more about ourselves through other people through relationships, and that's what we're going to talk about today. If you remember in our first video, this is one of the main areas that really makes up a fulfilling life, and it's a big one. And if you haven't seen the video, the link's below. Feel free to go back and view it, but you certainly don't need to do that first. You can do that afterwards. But the longest living populations in the world, all across the world, have this in common. They invest heavily in the relationships of their lives, in their families, in their partnerships, and also in their communities. And it's interesting, if you look at studies, they show that things like smoking, obesity, happiness, even loneliness are contagious among groups of people. Have you ever noticed how, if someone spends a lot of time with certain people, they become like one another? A year and a half ago, I read a book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And I wrote a column about it at one point, but essentially it was a palliative care nurse who spent a lot of time with people at the end of life. And many of their regrets, she began to notice over decades, were the same. And she boiled it down to really 5 of the biggest regrets people had in common. Now, I'm not going to go over them all today, but I do want to share 2 because it pertains to what we're going to discuss. One of them was, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And another was, I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. And of course, when someone says that, they mean to the people in their lives, to the other relationships they have. Now today, I'm going to give you some specific ideas, some action steps you can take to invest some time and energy now. There's never been a better time to build and strengthen the relationships that mean so much to us ultimately, and that help to make the quality of our lives. And it's also a great opportunity for you to give, which I'll talk about in a bit. But when I think of relationships, I really think of 2 things. There are the breadth of the relationships you have, and then the depth. What is your network, the breadth? How many people do you know, and how many people you have in your family that you stay in contact with, friends, relatives, community, colleagues, and so on. And then what's the level of depth that you have and that you create with the people that you care most about? And we're going to talk about those 2 different areas, and I'll give you some specific thoughts on each. But let's start with depth, because I think that applies to virtually any relationship you have. Right now, as I said before, people really have dropped back into their common humanity. We're asking bigger questions. What does this all mean? What does the future look like? And so forth. And collectively, we are more willing, you'll find, I'm sure, and you may already have found, people are willing to have deeper conversations, talk about where they are as a person. So let me give you some thoughts about a couple things that you can do to magnify the depth of the relationships you have and what you can give to the people that you surround yourself with and care about. The first one is this. There has never been a better time. We have both the physical time and we have the reflection that we've all experienced to document and capture the lessons and the experiences you want to live on after you're gone. Now's a great time to start to put down on paper or video or an audio recording some of the messages, some of the lessons you want to share with your loved ones, with your kids, your grandkids, your family members. If you have a cell phone, you have a video recorder, an audio recorder, and at the very least, you can certainly begin to write the things that you'd love your closest relationships to know, and the things you'd like to be able to pass on for years from now. And now there's no better time. So I encourage you to start that as one idea. It helps you not only reconnect with what are some of the things you've learned. It's a really interesting exercise to go through. I've done it recently myself, which is really healthy. But it also allows you to create a gift you can actually give to the ones that matter most. So that's one. Document and capture the lessons and messages of your life. The second is be willing to go a layer deeper. As I said before, people want to have these conversations. They might not know how, but we all want to have these conversations. We need to, because this has been a trying time. And a few ideas on how to connect deeply with people you engage with to get to a place that is meaningful, more meaningful. I think two things. Number one, if you value relationships in your life and you think that they are truly as important as I'm suggesting here, now's a great time to become sincerely curious about other people. People can tell if you're asking them a question because you're just looking to ultimately speak yourself, or if you're asking a question and how sincere that question is and how much you really want to know the answer. And now's a great time to get sincerely curious. There's almost nothing that will create trust, which is really the glue of relationships, than sincere curiosity. And the second is listening, active listening. Everybody's heard you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Well, there's never been a better time. And really, it's the greatest gift you can give to people in this moment, is to just be there and listen with no agenda. Just ask them questions and give them a platform to speak and to get things off their chest. It'll mean more and will connect you more deeply with the people you know than almost anything else. So being willing to go a layer deeper starts with genuine curiosity and active listening, which kind of go hand in hand. The other thing I'll say here is look for similarities, not differences. There's plenty that we have that's not in common. Our differences are more clear now. There's a lot of ways that we're divided. But this experience has really brought us back to what we have in common, which is at a human level. So look for the similarities, and you will find them as you're having conversations with your friends, your family, your relatives you haven't talked to for a while, whoever you're engaged with, community members, and so on. And then the final thing is, this is a time to say the things you need to say. If this has reminded us of anything, it's how precious life is and how fragile we are, as I said before. And now is the moment in time to say the things you need to say to the people you care about most, especially the older friends or relatives you have. Do you have a sibling that there have been some unspoken things that perhaps it's time to let go of? Perhaps it's time to just get them off your chest, or try to, put them out there to forge a relationship or to repair it. Do you have some friends that you need to tell how you really feel? Just share some kind words about what they mean to you. How about relatives, your kids, your closest family members? Are there things you want them to know? Well, now's the time to say them. So let me review. Number one, share, document, and capture the messages you want to live on beyond you. Number two, be willing to go a layer deeper and think about those various elements of how you can create connection. And number three, now's the time to say the things that need to be said. Don't wait anymore. Say what you need to say to the people you love. And in many cases, you may find that it repairs or strengthens a relationship. It almost always does. All right, next, the breadth of relationships, right? So we've got, some of us are home with a loved one, a spouse, and some of us are in the opposite scenario where we're home and we are alone and isolated. So we'll talk about both. But if there was a hierarchy of the different relationships in your life, I would say it starts with you. What kind of relationship do you have with yourself? You can't give anything to any relationship unless you have a good, solid foundation with you. But beyond that, it's next our intimate relationships, right? Our spouses or our loved ones. And there's one thing I'll say about this. It's something my wife and I did recently. Whether it's your intimate relationship or your family, if you're close together with anyone right now and you're sharing the same space, make sure that you are finding time to put everything aside. Stop the TV, stop the books, stop the phone, stop everything, and just have a moment to connect. So my wife and I, we decided we're gonna get up every morning, and even though we have 2 kids in the house, we're gonna give them something to do and sit down and just have a few sips of coffee and just be, to connect. And we do this a few other times throughout the day. It doesn't have to be profound, but make sure you carve out time just to connect and just to be, because those moments will remind you that you're all in this together, and it'll give you the connection you need to sustain this time. For your friendships, there's never been a better time. I've talked to friends I haven't talked to in many years, and this is a pretty common thing you're seeing, right? So who haven't you talked to for a long time that was meaningful at one time that you could reconnect with? Who do you usually talk to periodically? But maybe it's time to increase the frequency of your communication, to really check in with them. And here's a couple ideas on how to forge or build those connections for people that you haven't talked to or you don't talk to that often. Ask people things about their family. Ask about the different members of their family. Go one by one and talk about each one. Ask them, what's a thought that they've had that's marked this week, or a realization that's marked the day. What surprised them about this experience is a great way to open up conversation. But use these elements. And one other one, by the way, is when you're connecting people, ask them who else they've connected with, because I think everybody's having this common experience. But I invite you to think about, putting down on paper, I'm going to reach out to 1 or 2 or 3 people each week for the foreseeable future. And maybe don't stop that. Maybe keep, reinstill that connectivity so that this isn't a regret later. And then colleagues and community. I think the same thing applies there, right? So just keep in close contact with people. And one really beautiful and interesting thing that's happened at the Oxford Club, I'll give you an example, is that our employees naturally started to start professional work meetings with just a few minutes of checking in. How are you? How are things? How's everybody feeling? How's everybody handling this? How's this week been? How's the day been? That's just a human instinct. And we've since nurtured that. But the same is true. Take a few minutes, even if you're going out to do something or you're connecting about for a practical reason, take a second and just ask people how they are. I promise you it will strengthen and deepen the connections you have. And now's a great time. And then finally, people that you don't even know. There are so many online communities that are available, and this has only, increased that in this most recent experience here. And there are plenty of places for you to connect with like-minded individuals. Now, you're part of the club, and we're so happy that you're part of this community. What other communities could you reach out and connect with? And the only thing I'll say is, remember, try to connect with people and communities that bring out the best parts of you, that make you feel better and happier and healthier. Because we all know that there's plenty of frustration out there, and that can be a slippery slope. And then lastly, no matter where you are, whether you are surrounded by people currently or whether you're alone, and maybe most especially if you're alone, you may not feel connected. You may feel isolated. You may not even feel loved that much, but you are needed. There are so many people out there in need right now. And if you're feeling isolated or, squirrely or frustrated, one of the best things you can do is try to figure out how you can offer something, volunteer in some way. And there are so many different ways. But remember, even during this isolation, and we're, hopefully coming out of it soon, people still need their medications. They need to go to the doctor. They need groceries. They need somebody to talk to. There's a lot of ways you can volunteer other than money that will allow you to make the most of this experience and give something back to people you have never met before. And so I hope that thinking about this particular area, relationships, and the various ways that you can deepen and invest in this aspect of your life is helpful. And I encourage you to take the time and give me some feedback. Send me some things that this brought up for you. What are you thinking about? What are you planning on? What are you looking forward to? What have you done already? I know most of you have probably taken steps in this area. I'd love to hear them. Click on the final slide at the end of this. And I look forward to seeing you next time for the Survive and Thrive series.